Would you like to be somebody who understands why humanity depends on the humility of its citizens? Then listen to this entire video where I explain how the greatest problem humanity faces are that its citizens suffer, which is the cause of the problems that the citizens face. Now, you need humility to accept that you have problems in the first place before you even have any hope to solve them. And that's why humility sits at the core of humanity's fate, essentially. So before we get into this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to learn more about self-development, dating, Jungian psychology, and how to reduce suffering in life. Let's get into it. Okay, so yesterday I actually made a video on why I thought courage is the most valuable personality trait, or just generally characteristic, for your individual life and for society, because without courage you do not have the capabilities needed to face the problems and solve them that threaten the well-being of humanity. But just simply claiming that courage is the most valuable trait is not conducive to actually building courage. And courage is a trait to be developed, and it does not just appear. You do not just suddenly have courage. I believe humility is actually the preceding trait to courage, which enables problem solving. Because I said, problems create suffering for humanity, and the greatest skill, or most valuable skill, is that problem, the ability to reduce the suffering by solving these problems. And you need courage to face the problems first. However, I think humility is the predecessor, is the actually one step further, is actually the core of what is needed to solve problems. So humility is the resource required for admitting the existence of a problem, but then you need to intertwine the humility with courage. So in the last video I said, before you can solve a problem, you need to first admit that it even exists, because if you don't admit it, you truncate the trajectory of solving any problem. You can't solve a problem if you don't even admit that it's there in the first place. So you first need the humility to accept, I'm limited, I make mistakes, and I have a problem at hand. That's what is needed. And then you need to connect it with courage to actually face the problem. First you take the humility, I have a problem, and then you need courage with the humility to face the problem. So just to sort of break this down a bit, the most fundamental problem of society, as I said, is that we have problems which make us suffer. Now, the reason, if we take this one step further back, the reason we have problems is because of this connection between the limited nature of humans and the infinite nature of reality, or of the environment, essentially. That's the problem. So we have limited nature, and then we have problems because of our limited nature, and those create suffering. So the problems are created by the environment because of this irreconcilable nature between the infinite environment and the finite human being. That's the key. So the task of highest priority for humanity is to admit, locate, and solve these problems that are at hand as a consequence of our limited nature. That's really key. So it's the problems are created due to this relationship between the infinite environment and limited nature of our human being. So you need humility for that first step, to admit you have a problem. That's the crux of it all. You need the humility. So this is a truth now. One thing we know for certain is that change is constant. The environment shifts continually. So by default, the solutions we created in the past that were efficient and effective in the past will eventually become obsolete. We can be certain of that. This we know. All because the nature of the problems are dynamic. As I said, the environment is infinite. It has seemingly enough energy to shift around us continually, permanently. And the problems then that are created, with this dynamic between the human, the finite human, and the infinite environment is shifting, it's changing continuously. So the problems created by the environment for us that we need to solve, they are changing. The traits that characterize the problem are changing. This we know. And all because the problems are dynamic. So the key characteristic needed to overcome this issue and update humanity's solutions is humility. Because you must be willing to admit that the old solutions are obsolete. And that is a task which typically older generations struggle with, because they become slightly conservative. They want to maintain the status quo, because that's also a problem in itself. That is the root of human nature, is, when you get older, it's difficult to, I would say, you become more fearful of the unknown, and that because you're very used to, you become, I don't want to say, satisfied, but you become old, and you no longer have that energy, and I think the resilience to face dragons, let's say, something like that. And that's not saying that if you're older, you're incapable of facing dragons, not at all, but there's a tendency for humans as they get older to want to maintain the status quo and remain conservative in their outlooks, and they fear change, essentially. So it really lies in the hands of the younger generations to update the system, and that is this concept of saving your father from the dragon. It's saving your culture from the collapse, basically. So hubris, so excessive pride and self-confidence, is the trait that jeopardizes, it hijacks that potential for updating our solutions, because you think, well, hubris, you think if you're hubristic, you think, I'm already perfect, what I'm doing is correct, and you're arrogant about it. And that blocks the potential for admitting there's a problem at hand. That is the process of updating, it blocks the process of updating, and is actually the cause of the downfall of civilizations, I would say. And that's also why hubris or pride is connected to or described as a Luciferian trait. It is one that nurtures evil or just negative. I would say it nurtures a decline. So because when you're arrogant, you fail to admit there's a problem, and you could think of a problem as a dragon. The dragon grows and grows and grows when you don't attend yourself to fight the dragon. It becomes stronger and stronger. Let me think of an example. Let's say you have a partner who's cheating on you, and you kind of know it, but you don't want to face it. Then they cheat more and more, and then they're already planning on moving out and leaving you, but you're not facing it. You're not acknowledging it. And then this person is changing more and more and more, and then suddenly they tell you, I'm cheating on you, I'm moving out, and then the dragon comes to confront you because there's no more space for it to move. It's so big, you cannot overlook it anymore, and then it just sort of eats you alive, and it pulls you into the underworld where you do not understand anything. It's basically it's like a symbolic case of a downfall, of being dragged into the underworld, sort of mythologically speaking. Yeah. And the thing is, we are never ever certain of things in life. There's very few things we can be certain of. I mean, one thing is, the change is constant, I would say, but it's an assumption, let's say. Because of our limited cognitive capacity and our limited nature, physical and cognitive nature, we just can't be certain of seemingly anything. And because of that, humility is the perfect trait to enable you to learn and extend and make your map of reality more sophisticated and more accurate. Because you just don't know, you're not qualified to have pride, because you just don't, because of your limited nature, because you just don't have the ability to accurately interpret the world. You need to be humble. You just need it. That's why humanity depends on it. Your life depends on it, really. So Humanity depends on the ability of its civilians to admit there's a problem at hand, and by showing humility and then courage to face the problem, locate the problem, and move on and solve the problem finally. Yeah. So in conclusion, humility is needed for humanity to thrive and prevent it from declining, because humanity is faced with continuous problems that are created by the environment and within itself humanity, its societies. And in order to admit, basically the fate of humanity depends on whether we can solve these problems and reduce the suffering that they create. And the first step of solving a problem is to first admit that you and accept that you have a problem. And you need humility for that. If you're proud, you deny, you repudiate any kind of indication that there's a problem. You refuse it. You reject it. And that is how a civilization falls, by being proud and not updating its solutions to the problems which are continually changing. So please leave a comment below whether you think there are any other traits that are key for humanity, that are at the base of problem solving, or any other traits, personality characteristics that determine the fate of humanity, essentially. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to learn more about self-development, dating, Jungian psychology, and how to reduce suffering in life. Thank you for listening.